was on April the 2nd in 1998 when President Clinton announced that he had nominated Ed Romero to be the next U.S. ambassador to Spain.
No one has done more than Ed Romero to promote the relationship between Spain and New Mexico and Spanish culture in New Mexico. He is the quintessential grand old man of New Mexico. He is jolly, learned, and passionate, and he's a man who has never met a stranger without introducing them to the Spanish heritage of New Mexico. It's his passion, it's his life.
Mis recuerdos son profundos y buenos y con mucha alegría. Mis antepasados se marcharon de España en 1580. Eran los españoles que llegaron y se asentaron en un lugar que se llama San Juan, al otro lado del río, y lo nombraron San Juan de los Caballeros. Y el líder era un señor que se llamaba Juan de Oñate y tenía un soldado que se llamaba Bartolomé Romero. Mi bisnieto es la 16 generación de Romero. Entonces, cuando llegué a España, me sentí como un pájaro llegando a su nido. A llegar a mi madre patria histórica. España es mi madre patria histórica. Ya había viajado varias veces, pero esta vez era más formal, que llegué como embajador. Y tengo tantos recuerdos tan buenos, incluyendo al tiempo que pasé con su majestad, con don Juan Carlos y Sofía, y ahora también conocí al príncipe que ahora es rey, y el príncipe ha viajado aquí en Nuevo México 3 veces. Los primeros pobladores europeos que llegaron a los Estados Unidos no eran los peregrinos en el este, eran los españoles. Todas esas generaciones hemos mantenido el idioma, la religión, etcétera, etcétera. Vinieron mis parientes de un lugarcito que se llama Corral de Almaguer, que está al sur de Madrid, y pasamos mucho tiempo ahí con gente muy semejante a la gente de aquí de Nuevo México. La pasamos tan bien, y la llegada que me dieron, la bienvenida que me dieron, la entrevista era todo en español, y se quedaron los periódicos de televisión medios espantados del orgullo de ser españoles de un origen, y es lo que llamamos. Que nuestra juventud no saben qué son, no saben, están perdiendo el orgullo, no saben nada de su origen, que de españoles o de México, de Latinoamérica, que tenemos que hacer algo. Entonces ahí empezamos la fundación. Herbert Luján es un caballero de primera categoría, pero el que ha hecho todo el trabajo es Ed Luján. Nosotros podemos planear, nosotros podemos hablar de estrategias para aquí, pero la persona que hace todo es Ed Luján. Sus propios recursos, con sus contactos, ha hecho una obra pero fantástica.
Con las monjas, con las rulas, es verdad, te daban. Pero querían que habláramos y aprendiéramos inglés bien. Pero cuando ya los hijos de nosotros comenzaron a nacernos, a ir a la escuela, no queríamos que les pegaran a ellos. Dijimos todos los de mi generación mía, incluyendo el embajador, dijimos no, vamos a enseñarles inglés primero. Y así no les van a pegar. Ya cuando íbamos a enseñarles español, ya no lo necesitaban, porque todos los escueleros, todos sus amigos, todos hablaban nomás inglés. Ya cuando fueron para mis nietos, ya se bajó más, porque mis hijos no lo entendían y no les podían enseñar a ellos a hablarlo. Y poquito a poquito comenzaron a ver, ni entenderlo ni hablarlo. Y por eso formamos la fundación. Nos tomamos 10 años. Comenzó la fundación en 1983 y en 1993 el Centro Cultural de...
Es posible. ¿Qué embajada te gustaría? Pues España. Unos días después, la secretaria de Bill Clinton, vas a recibir una llamada del presidente: España es tuyo. ¿Cómo estás? Yo estaba espantado ahí, de pie, en mis shorts. No me digas, tuve tanto apoyo de hispanos, de Henry Cisneros en Texas, del señor Peña de Colorado, español, de Bill Richardson. Tuve un apoyo de la comunidad española, pero profunda. A ver, un apoyo muy fuerte tuve.
He was a real ambassador both to the United States and in particular to New Mexico. As a gesture, immediately, he took paintings and artwork from New Mexico to the embassy and to the residents. And he knew Spanish fluently. So it became, the combination was beautiful. He always spoke of New Mexico every chance he got.
Y luego mi mujer se llamaba Cayetana, el orgullo de ser española de sangre. Y luego me jubilé. La mejor parte de mi vida era mi Cayetana, mi esposa. La segunda cosa era ser embajador de Estados Unidos en España.
I'm a Republican and he's a Democrat, and we're both very strong in our own parties. Opponents, but colleagues, and gradually we became even closer friends. The relationship between New Mexico and Spain has always been there because the settlers came to New Mexico very, very early. And we've been here 430 years at this point. So there's always been that relationship. Our ancestors came from Spain. But it really took hold when Ed Romero went to Spain as the ambassador of the United States, because of the close ties that he had with the Cultural Center and the Cultural Center Foundation. We began to have much, much closer relationships. We went there a number of times to talk about the Cultural Center. Well, the influences that he brought here from Spain after he retired as the ambassador are seen very much at the Cultural Center. They're influences of these resource centers and the influences of Instituto Cervantes continue to serve after 20 years. They still continue to be very, very important. Ed is really very, very personal. I think he's the epitome of what an ambassador is. An ambassador is both an ambassador of goodwill, an ambassador of policies, a representative of a country, but easy to smile, easy to talk to, easy to have long conversations with him, easy to tease him, an ambassador to people and treating people like people.
We were introduced to Ambassador Romero through our good friends Richard and Susan Seligman. And Ambassador Romero has a real interest in spiritual and religious things. We also share a great passion for New Mexico, its history and its heritage, and and the role of Mexico in New Mexican history, which is often missed by some in New Mexico. And I'm interested in New Mexico politics simply because we care about the state and the people in it. Let me mention a few things that we can be proud of about Ambassador Romero as a promoter of Spain. I would say there's no greater champion of Spanish or of Spain in New Mexico than Ambassador Romero. To say that he's largely responsible for the creation of the National Hispanic Cultural Center, the Hispano Chamber of Commerce. He is directly responsible for the Instituto Cervantes being in Albuquerque. In fact, his greatest passion in life and his greatest concern at his advanced age is that young people in New Mexico are not in touch with their Spanish language and culture. A bunch of men, and it was a group of men in those days who got together, and they shared a common concern that the young people growing up were not learning Spanish, were not in touch with their Spanish history. And that was the sole reason why the Hispanic Cultural Center was created to accomplish that goal. He is also responsible for a fully funded chair at the University of New Mexico in honor of the Prince of Asturias, now King Philip. That also is accompanied by 2 full scholarships for Spanish students. So those are just a few examples of the way in which he's promoted Spanish and Spain in New Mexico. Ambassador Romero took New Mexico to Spain when he became ambassador, and to be honest, he was a bit of a shock to them. He was the first Spanish-speaking U.S. ambassador to Spain. And both because of his Spanish and also because of his grand personality, he became very popular immediately. And he introduced New Mexico in Spain, not only in halls of power, but also in small villages when he attended. He loved to attend the small villages and all of the Spanish festivals. And he would share stories of New Mexico and explain. One of his favorite stories was when he met the Archbishop of Seville church, and he mentioned that his family came from a long line of penitentes. And the Archbishop of Seville is the world leader of the penitentes. And he said, I'm the world leader. I know there are no penitentes in America, in the United States. And Ambassador Romero introduced the Archbishop of Seville to the fact that that history and that culture is deeply rooted in New Mexico and in his own personal family. For Ambassador Romero, it was a coming home when he went to Spain. For his friends and colleagues in Spain, it was an introduction for them to Spain in the New World, particularly in New Mexico. There are 3 men in New Mexico that have done more to promote and reinforce connections with Spain and New Mexico than any others. One of those is Mr. Ed Lujan, and that's a whole nother story. The second is Dr. Thomas Chavez, former director of the New Mexico History Museum and former director of the National Hispanic Cultural Center. He's also a decorated author and has written 14 books. Most of them are about the connection between New Mexico and Spain. He also wrote a book based on Ambassador Romero's life called Timeless Caravan that takes the story from the arrival of Ambassador Romero's great-great-great-grandfather to the New World, all the way back to Ambassador Romero's return to his home village in Spain. That's called Timeless Caravan.
Tom era uno de los primeros directores del centro e hizo también una obra muy... Tom tiene también un orgullo muy especial. Ha escrito varios libros de la historia de Nuevo México, de España.
My uncle was in the administration of President Carter, and I was back there working at the Smithsonian Institution on loan from New Mexico, and my uncle invited me to lunch. And so on top of a hotel overlooking the White House, there was my uncle, Fabian Chavez, sitting with Ed Romero. After that, Ed invited me to be a member of the Hispanic Culture Foundation that they started. So I was on the board of directors for that for a long time. And so, you know, we were good friends for a long time. I think just through his whole life, is tried to report or support and share Hispanic culture and the role of Spain in the history of New Mexico, the Southwest, and the United States. He did a lot of little things that I'm witness to, and so he was always looking to make the connections to let people know that there are these there's these abiding connections between Spain and New Mexico. As ambassador, how did Ed promote New Mexico and the United States and Spain? And one of the things he did was collect art, New Mexican art from New Mexican artists, and from the museums where I worked. And he took New Mexican art and hung it all throughout the embassy in Madrid. So one of the most memorable things he did was that he brought Native Americans from the Pueblo of San Juan, in their language, Okeowinge, and they were dancers, and he took them to the town that his ancestor was from. Corral de Almaguer. He created the United States Spain Committee that still exists, and so they would alternate meetings. Same thing by using that committee to take business people from New Mexico and the Southwest to Spain to make connections, and he's left that legacy going on. He always tried to promote. The commonality between the two countries. Ambassador, and his first speech he gave at the airport when he arrived was about he's the 13th generation descendant of Alcazar and Romero from Corral de Almaguer, who left, in the 16th century. We are not that different, and you are with us. What is the legacy of Ed Romero? How is that lasting in Spain and in New Mexico? It was because of him that the Instituto Cervantes is in Albuquerque, New Mexico, promoting Spanish language. And we'll see of his because he's one of the founding members of the National Hispanic Cultural Center. So those are two legacies right there, and an obvious one. They're funded. He created the King Felipe VI chair, endowed chair at the University of New Mexico for computer sciences. And so there's always going to be at the University of New Mexico a professor from Spain teaching that subject. It's a permanent position. And so there's going to be generations after him who want to live up to that. And so his legacy is going to be a permanent one. He is a man who will not be forgotten.
¿Qué podemos hacer entonces para formalizar más estas cosas? Y entonces le di 2 nombres de cónsules honorarios.
He was looking for somebody to do his genealogy for because if he was appointed to be the next ambassador by the president to Spain, that he would like to present his history, his family history, and his genealogy to King Juan Carlos. When the Senate voted to confirm him to be the next ambassador, he received 100 votes in favor. What I feel that the most accomplishment Ed Romero brought to Spain from New Mexico is, our history, our culture. And that's what he took with him when he went to Spain, because he was very, very astute to wanting to know who he is, his history, and where he came from. And he was very proud that he was the first Hispanic or Spanish citizen of the United States to be the ambassador of Spain. And that's what he was most proud of. And then as far as the good that he brought to Spain, he wanted to take his things with him to Spain. So the ambassador's mansion or house would remind him of where he came from, New Mexico. And also he was very proud of who he is. And he was very proud that he could show people in a book the history of his family going all the way back to Spain, from New Mexico to Spain. Our people here knew very little about Spain, and the Spanish knew very little about us. So he was able to bring this blend together.
Yo soy Alfredo Mondragón, soy el cónsul honorario de España aquí en Albuquerque. Conozco de 1960, porque yo estaba aquí en Albuquerque y Edward era el presidente del comité demócrata. Y tuvimos oportunidad de trabajar porque yo fui un representante del Estado. Sabe que Edward Romero tenía un negocio muy importante. Él fue el primer hombre, el primer empresario que comenzó una compañía solar y se llamaba Solar America. Y, como se ha involucrado en las leyes de Nuevo México para mandar que enseñaban español aquí en Nuevo México, en las escuelas primarias. Luego que pasaron esas leyes para que era mandatorio que estudiaban los estudiantes españoles. Segundamente, toda su carrera, en Albuquerque, en la política, y entonces combinando con su embajador de Estados Unidos a España, pues siempre era un hombre muy dedicado al estudio de español. Y hay muchas historias de cómo llegó y cómo comenzó su término como embajador. Por ejemplo, la embajada de Estados Unidos en España, todas las artesanías, todos los fotos de Nuevo México. De modo que totalmente la embajada estuvo llena de la cultura de Nuevo México. Y cuando tuvo oportunidad el embajador de traer indígenas de Nuevo México para hacer las danzas allá en España, eso fue posible. 60 años pasados, siempre él fue la fuerza más importante de conectar Nuevo México y España. En el negocio, en la cultura, en la política y también en su familia personal. Para el distinguido embajador, gracias por todo lo que has hecho por Nuevo México, por España y por nuestra gente. Muchísimas gracias. Thank you, Edward.